Hello, everybody. Welcome back. We are finishing our lead up to Malignant today with Rings, the 2017 feature length film, not the 2005 short film. This movie was pretty bad, and by bad I mean boring. I have notes. It's funny, the first movie I stopped taking notes partway through because I was just interested in watching the movie. The second movie, I continued taking notes throughout, and I didn't love everything about it, but I was interested enough to keep paying attention. This movie, I stopped taking notes because I was bored, and I stopped paying attention to the movie, and I was doing other stuff. But let's get into what I have to say. Right off the bat, the logo at the beginning is Paramount, which is weird because the earlier ones were DreamWorks, which is owned by Universal. So apparently they sold the rights, or for some reason it reverted or something. I'm not sure what the story is there. But that's kind of interesting. We have these, all three of the movies have this initial group of people that something bad happens to that supposedly serves as the catalyst for the rest of the movie. It's a little bit different in this movie, but we have our people on the plane. One of the guys mentions that he finds a VCR, so we're already addressing the fact that VHS tapes and VCRs in the year 2017 are kind of a rarity. Certainly not common anymore. But again, that doesn't really go anywhere. I wish they would pick up on that. I wish that would be like, not the main point of a story, but a big part of a story. But it's not. And then I wrote, what are the odds that two strangers on a plane have both seen it? Because there's three people sitting next to each other, a guy, and then two girls who are friends, and one of the girls has seen it, and the other guy happens to be talking to the girl that hasn't seen it, who then happens to mention that to her friend. Seems a little bit contrived. And, like, sometimes I can buy contrived things, because I'm like, okay, I get it. We want to watch a movie, right? The reason this is an interesting story is because this big coincidence happened. But this is not relevant to the rest of the story. It's not really a catalyst for the rest of the story. It doesn't play into it like the beginnings of 1 and 2 do. So it's just contrived for no reason. Then we get the guy from Big Bang Theory. The main guy. Is his name Leonard in the show? Or Howard? I think it's Leonard. It's not Sheldon. The guy who played Russ in Christmas Vacation. He's a main character in this movie, which was kind of interesting. And he's at this flea market, yard sale type thing. And there's a VCR and a bunch of old VHS tapes. And this girl goes over to look at it, and he, like, shoos her away. It's like, if you don't want it, if you're not interested, I'm going to buy it. And it's like, that's kind of a jerk thing to say to someone else who's also shopping. But she says some line like, who would want an old VCR? And it's like, you went over to look at it. So clearly you had some interest at least. But again, we're kind of playing up the idea that this technology is outdated and old, but not in an important way. It doesn't really come back at all. So it's weird. Like, come on, focus on that. And so it turns out that, like, this stuff at this sale was all owned by the guy who died on the plane, but that didn't need to be the case to drive the story forward. And the guy who's buying it, who's a professor in this movie, the guy from The Big Bang Theory, he says something along the lines of, oh, this is vintage, right? This stuff is cool, blah, blah, blah. He's acting like these are, like, hard to find. He's acting like, oh my gosh, you never see a VCR for sale. I get that they're not common and that they're rare to find in people's homes, but you could go into any Goodwill or Salvation Army and find stacks of VCRs. They're not rare and they're not hard to find. So I feel like they're trying to make it a bigger deal than it is. It's weird. It's weird. So most of this movie takes place at a college. And there's one scene where we see, like, this weird, like, old technology setup. And so I thought for a minute, of course it didn't happen, But I thought for a minute, like, oh, that's clever, because a lot of times, if you need old technology that people don't have anymore, colleges will have that, or libraries will have that, or the library at a college will have it, right? Because, like, I know my college, when I was in school, had a lot of old equipment that was useful for, you know, looking at old artifacts and documents and videos and all sorts of stuff that, like, people don't use still for entertainment purposes, but schools still use for educational purposes. So I was like, oh, that's going to be, like, how they address the fact that there's all this out. No, it doesn't. It's not a factor. It doesn't come back. The idea's there, but it's not grown upon. Then I wrote, I thought this one was going to be about the tape again, because the first maybe half of it is all about, you know, the tape, and I watched the tape, and I got to make a copy of the tape and show it to somebody else, very similar to the short film leading into 2. But then it kind of just stops being about that, and then it becomes 2, the rest of 2, where this person is just researching this ghost story. And it's not interesting. And it doesn't really line up with what we learned in the first 2 movies. It doesn't continue the story forward. It's more story, but it doesn't continue the story. And I just didn't care. And maybe it's because I watched all 4 of these in one day. But I've done that with things before. And if they're good, I still enjoy them. I was just bored. I was so bored. So we see people copying this thing digitally. So it's interesting that the tape itself still exists, or at least a copy of it on a VHS. But then we've also got digital files of it going around. And so we get to this point where a character has made a copy of it, but she doesn't have anyone to watch it, which again is the same as the plot from the short film. Maybe that's why they named it the same thing, because it basically takes that and puts it into a new setting. And I even said that that one should have taken place in college, and this one does. But my thought was, if we're copying it digitally, we've got the digital file, we're using computers, it's on the computer, just post it online somewhere. Like, obviously that's a horrible thing to do, but if you're desperate and you're on the 7th day and you need someone else to watch it, just post it online. Someone will watch it. I know. I make videos all the time, and I post them online. Not many people watch them, but one person is probably going to watch that if you post it online somewhere. So I don't know if it's just like a moral thing that they don't want to do that, but I feel like at that point, the characters in this movie are not the type of characters that are going to take the moral high ground there. So that's a little weird, and it gets weirder, but I'll get back to that later. So a lot of the stuff in this movie just seemed like it tried to be more of the same, but different. Not better, not continuing, just more, but different. And one of the first ones is, you know, instead of the old square tube TVs, now we have a fancy modern TV, and it falls down, so it's facing down. So I wrote, now the TV is facing down. It's different. It's not better. It doesn't move the story along, but it's technically different. And then I wrote, so does she like water or no? So in the second movie, it's implied that she hates water, and like, water's almost like a weakness, which doesn't really make sense, because anytime she comes, she's like accompanied by water. And I didn't think much of it then. And so it was a flaw then in 2. But it continues to be a flaw here, because still when she comes back in this one, they still have her accompanied by water. So I'm like, so is she weak to water? Or does it not actually make her weak and she just doesn't like it? Is it like Anakin Skywalker in sand? I don't understand. It's not the biggest problem with this movie. But I'm just like, why is she always... I know why she's always surrounded by water. It's because of the well. But like, if she's actually weak to water, which it implied in part 2, that should be an issue, and it's not. So it's more of a flaw in part 2. I just picked up on it in this one. Oh, at one point I wrote, is it even connected? So this isn't really connected to the first two movies. Technically, it does take place in the future. It is still Samara causing the problems. And apparently Rachel's name is sitting on a computer file somewhere. But, like, it's not. It's a different story, different characters. None of the stuff that happened in 2 that progressed the story, even though I didn't like how it progressed the story forward, it still did. But none of that is continued on into this one. This is like totally different. We're finding out different information about different people related to Samara. So, again, you know, I talked about in part 2 movies that are written as other movies, that the names and characters and stuff are changed. That kind of seems like what this one is that it was just a ghost story. And then when they were like, oh, we'll tweak this and tweak that and tweak that and add in these things about the videotape, and we can call it a Ring movie. And it seems like that might be more likely to be what happened here because, A, it's 12 years after the last movie, from 2005 to 2017, so it seems unlikely that, like, someone involved with the second one really wanted to do a third one. And 2, as I mentioned before, it changed studios. So it seems like something that somebody wrote and somebody else was like, oh, you know what? We just got the rights to the Ring franchise. We could tweak this a bit and call it a Ring movie, and then more people will go see it. I don't know that that's what happened, but that's kind of what it seems like happened. And then I wrote down, we've got jump scares. Again, that was a big point of praise of mine for the first movie, is that it didn't rely on jump scares. This one doesn't have a ton, but it's got a few. By the way, I don't think I had ever seen this one before. Nothing jogged my memory. And speaking of jump scares, we do have more facial distortion crap that gets to me. And I tried predicting when it was going to happen, but it was not good enough. So I got both of them. There are 2 big facial distortion shots in this, not counting Samara, of which there are a few of her also. So this one got me a bit. And this is the one that I watched the latest at night, so we'll see how I do tonight, but what are you going to do? At one point, some characters mentioned that the tape is a doorway to the other side. Again, this is an idea that was originated in the short film where they talk about it being an alternate reality, a different universe. Once again here, it doesn't go anywhere. Why are you going to recycle old plot threads that have already not gone anywhere, bring them up again, and then still take them nowhere? That seems so odd. Okay, this one, someone's going to think that I'm lying here. But here's what happened. At one point, a character watches the tape, and there's a clip of a bird in it. And just like in part 2, where I asked, did they add new stuff to the video? I don't remember that stuff in the first movie, but maybe it was just part of the video that they didn't show, or maybe I wasn't paying enough attention. In this movie, specifically that shot of the bird, I was like, I don't remember there being a bird. And like, most of the things in the video in the first film are like, we see where they came from throughout the film. And I'm like, I don't remember anything about birds. We got stuff with flies, we had ladders, we had that mirror, right? But like, I don't remember anything about a bird. And so it stuck out to me as that seems like something that they added here, but I didn't write it down at that time because I was like, it's probably just something that you didn't notice or they just didn't show. Whatever, it's fine. But then, later on, a bird flies into their windshield. And so I was like, okay, so this now makes it seem like they've added in this part about the bird because they want to do something with that. They want to do something with material that hasn't already been covered in the first 2 movies. So at that point I wrote down, did they add the bird? And then even later in the movie, the characters in the movie point out that, hey, that bird wasn't there before, spelling it out to the audience that didn't notice it. So someone's going to think that I'm lying, and I just pretended that I noticed that ahead of time, but really they just said it in the movie. But I swear, that particular shot of the bird I recognized as something I had not seen before. I just didn't realize how important it was going to be. Important, not really, but... okay, what's next? So then, again, we keep bringing these things up, and then they go nowhere. We get this thing where the main character of this movie, Julia, she tries to make a copy. She doesn't really want to make someone else watch it. She doesn't agree morally with this. But her boyfriend's like, just make a copy. We'll decide what to do with it later. Really? Really? Anyway, so she makes the copy, or she starts to make a copy, but it won't copy. And it's like this big thing. Oh my gosh, her version won't copy. And then the Big Bang Theory guy, he's like, the file size on yours is bigger than the original. How is that possible, right? And then it turns into this thing where, like, her video is different and there's new footage, like I already said, blah, 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 blah. Again, that doesn't go anywhere. The concept of digital files, you know, altering themselves and blah, 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 blah. Like, that could have been a big thing. That could have been really interesting. It doesn't go anywhere. But I'm also kind of confused as to how her file was bigger, because nobody made a copy for her. Her boyfriend made a copy for someone else, and that other person bailed, and so to save him, she watched the copy that he made. And then when she tried to make a copy, they said that it wouldn't copy. But then it said that her version was larger. So I'm like, what file was larger? Did the copy eventually get made that she copied? And that's the file that's larger? Or was it the copy that he made but she watched? And at some point that altered and became a larger file size. None of that is explained. It never comes up again. The movie doesn't care. Then I wrote Kingpin because Vincent D'Onofrio is in this movie. Ironically, playing a blind man who is his main adversary in the Daredevil show. That's one of those things that I didn't read this on the IMDb trivia, but that's one of those things that if I see on IMDb trivia, I'm like, I don't care. This isn't about the movie, but it's like, this person would play the blind man in here, and he also played this other thing on which a blind man is a prominent feature. Like, I hate trivia like that because it's not about the movie, but in this case, I was like, oh, hey, he's blind, but he's the Kingpin who fights Daredevil, who's blind. So I'm a hypocrite. Okay, so then at one point I wrote down, why was Julia chosen? Why is her experience the one that's different? I kept waiting for there to be some connection between her and Samara. Like, is she related to Samara somehow? Is she, like, reincarnated? Did Samara's mother die and she's reincarnated in this person, right? No! No explanation is given for why she was chosen. We are told that she's the 12th person that has found the priest, who's Samara's father, that he's encountered. And he's like, but none of them have gotten as far as you have, blah, blah, blah. But we're never told what makes those people different, what makes them special, why they get this extra stuff. And so, you know, I mentioned in the first movie that we don't get hit with a big exposition at the beginning of the movie. Some things are explained, and other things are left vague. And I realize that it can sound, once again, hypocritical, or like I'm picking and choosing when those things bother me, but like, when the supernatural stuff is vague, fine, because it's supernatural, right? So what Samara can do, how that all works, I don't care. She's a ghost. She's doing ghost stuff. But the stuff with the people, that I want to understand, right? Because that determines how scary the movie is. The first two movies are scary because of the idea that just by watching this video, you are now part of the whole thing, right? You're part of it. And that video is in the movie. So by watching the movie, you're part of it, right? That can get you. But when something makes a character unique, but we're not told why or what about her makes her unique, then it's just like, okay, well, she's just randomly a chosen one, and I'm probably not. So this movie is not scary, right? So like, it makes your movie less scary if it can't apply to the audience, or if they can't like figure out a way as to, you know, how, oh, this reminds me of this person. Even if it doesn't relate to me, it might relate to somebody that I know, right? But she's just different for no reason. So it's like, okay, I don't care then. You didn't give me a reason to care, so I don't care. And then I wrote, was Samara a supernatural baby, or not. Because in the second movie, there's some line about how she didn't have a father. And in the IMDb trivia, it keeps talking about this thing about her father is an oceanic deity, which I believe comes from the Japanese versions of these movies. But I don't think it was ever actually mentioned. That part was ever actually mentioned in part 2. But there was the concept of, like Anakin, that there was no father, right? But it was like, they're like, the baby never cried. Except for when, the mom tried to drown it. But, like, the baby was a supernatural baby. Whereas in the first one, before we learned that, it's more implied that this was a normal girl who became, this spirit because of the circumstances of her death, right? And it's not explicitly stated, but that's what's implied, because that's what happens in ghost stories, right? And then in the second movie, we find out that, oh no, she was like actually evil. She was a supernatural baby, and while we might not agree with what the parents did, we can understand why they did it. But then in this movie, her father was just a priest who assaulted this girl and kidnapped her and held her in captivity for 9 months until the baby was born. My dogs are coming out. Go to your room! So, if she has human parents, what makes her supernatural? Are we ignoring the stuff that we learned in part 2 and we're back to the idea that it's the circumstances of her death that make her a ghost? Or is it something about the father or the mother? Or is it something about the conception and how evil that whole thing was, that it birthed evil? Because I feel like stuff like that happens a lot. So shouldn't there be thousands of Samaras out there? Maybe this was something that it was explained late in the film and I missed, because at that point I didn't care anymore. But when you undo some pieces of previous movies, you have to recognize the butterfly effect there and what other things that you undo. And if you don't rework how those things work, then your movies don't line up. So I mentioned earlier the concept of we're making digital copies of this. Why don't you just post it online, right? Somebody will watch it. Well, at the end of the movie, Samara does that. She takes over the main guy, Holt's computer, and like starts emailing a bunch of people this video, right? And I'm like, so the filmmakers understood that that was an option, right? It's not like nobody thought of it. They thought of it. So why wasn't it earlier in the movie? I don't understand. And then my last note is that the catalyst makes no sense. So I kind of touched on this before. We see these people on the plane. They die. They have no impact on the rest of the plot. But the VCR that the professor guy buys at the flea market, whatever, belonged to the guy on the plane that died. It doesn't need to. It doesn't matter that it does. They just tell us that it does. But it also tells us that it's 2 years later, which is also not relevant. Doesn't matter at all. Why is there a time jump in this? It doesn't make any sense. All that matters is the professor finds this VCR that has this tape in it. But I don't know. Is there a second time jump? I don't think it says how long after that scene the rest of the movie takes place. Maybe it did and I missed it. I literally, when this movie was over, I went back to the beginning to rewatch this because I didn't understand it. But by the time our main characters get involved in the story, this professor, has his own cult built up around us. Again, very similar to what happened in the short film. And he's got it all digitally. So the way it came across to me was that he's already involved in this curse and this story, and then he happens to find the tape. Maybe that's wrong. I'll give the movie the benefit of the doubt and say that this event, him buying this VCR and finding this tape, is what started that, and then maybe there was another time jump that I missed. I'll give the movie credit for that. even if it didn't show it. But that still has no relation to the plane scene that we saw at the beginning. And again, like I said, he makes it sound like he's super excited to find this VCR. If I've got a VCR, you know how I have it? Because I thought to myself one day, I should still have a working VCR because I still have a lot of stuff on VHS that I want to be able to watch. So I went to a Salvation Army and I bought a VCR for $3. So if this guy is interested in a VCR, he would own a VCR. Doesn't make sense that he would be out somewhere and see it and be like, oh, yeah, I've been looking for one of these. I'm going to buy this. And that's what sets the whole plot in motion, is him buying this particular VCR. And it makes no sense. In the first movie, we have the cousin who dies. Her relation to this journalist is what drives the plot forward. It makes sense. In the second movie, we have these two high school students that aren't related to the main characters, but they're in that town, and news of it spreads, and Rachel finds out about it, and that drives the plot forward. That lets her know that Samara is still around. Here, the plane scene has nothing to do with the rest of the movie. I didn't even read down one of my first notes was, it's very Final Destination-esque. Because we have this whole thing on a plane, which feels like it's straight out of Final Destination. We have this whole thing on a plane that does not connect to the rest of the story. And then we have this other scene in a flea market that technically sets up the rest of the plot, but it doesn't make sense how it does that, and it doesn't need to be there. So we've just wasted all this time for no reason. I didn't like this movie. It was bad. There were a couple things that they brought up briefly that I wish they would have spent way more time on, because that's the stuff that I find interesting. And at this point, I don't know if they're going to make any more of these, but like, I would love to see one where it's very much about the tape, the curse around the tape, and the process of continuing that cycle, but digitally. Right? And we show how people would actually react in those situations, trying to post it online, trying to copy it, and then if we want to have supernatural issues like the file won't copy or the tape is different for different people, right? Then we can bring it back and be like, well, to end this or to really do whatever, we have to go back to the VHS copy, right? We have to find this real thing, and then you can have a subplot where people have to go out and find a VCR. Because they might not know. If they don't want one, they might not realize, oh, I can just, go buy one of these down at the thrift store. It might be like, who do we know that has a VCR? It might be a thing where they use their college library, right? Like, that's a story that I want to see. Is almost like the Jumanji, right? How Jumanji updated from the board game to the video game to be in modern times. I want to see how this curse and how this ghost modifies itself to continue surviving. But I don't want that to be, 2 minutes total of a 2-hour movie. I want that to be the focus. That's what I think would be very interesting. Maybe I'm the only one. Maybe that's me. But that's what I want to see. But those are my thoughts on Rings, the 2017 feature movie. Let me know any thoughts that you have. Would you be interested in that? Or does that sound boring and dumb and stupid and I'm the only one that thinks that? Let me know what you think. That's what I think. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day. Hey everybody, Sam Tom here. Just wanted to let you know that I have 2 channels. If you're watching my music content, I also have a movie channel where I talk about movies and TV shows. If you're watching my movie content, I have a music channel where I do song covers, instrument demos, things like that. So feel free to check that out. Obviously, like, share, subscribe, comment, all that YouTube stuff. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.